Who wrote the New Testament? No, it's not the disciples of Jesus. What makes me so sure about that, you may ask? Well, let me show you. The Gospels of Mark and Matthew were written in Greek, not just any simple Greek, but Koine Greek. Mark and Matthew were illiterate, and they spoke Aramaic. How could two illiterate men who spoke Aramaic write a book in Greek? Come on. The second proof that shows the Gospel was not written by the disciples is in the Bible itself, in Matthew 9, verse 9. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him, and Matthew got up and followed him. Do you see how the text goes? Do you notice here that the story is not being told by Matthew? That's a whole different person writing about what he heard. Otherwise, the text would go like, "As Jesus went on from there, he saw me sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow him," he told me, and I got up and follow him. I hope your eyes are open now. Those books are like Bitcoin. No one knows who is behind them. Scholars reported that the Gospel of Mark was written around the years 30 and 40 after the death of Jesus, and the Gospel of Matthew was written around the years 60 and 70, almost a century after. Now, think about that. If the Gospel of Mark was written before Matthew, why they placed the book of Matthew before the book of Mark in the Bible? Well, let me tell you, the Gospel of Mark never talked about the virgin birth of Jesus, no virgin birth for him, but later on. About 30 years after, the author of Matthew added a little spice in the story. He literally took the Gospel of Mark, written many years before, and added his touch in it. So when the Council of Rome was assembling the Bible, Matthew made it to the first place. Funny, huh? Luke and Paul were educated. They could read and write. The only problem is that they never walked with Jesus. They were not disciples. They didn't even know Jesus. They heard stories. Do you have an idea of how distorted a story can get when passing from mouth to mouth? That's why there are so much inconsistencies in the New Testament. Let me show you what I mean by that. That is the Gospel of Matthew. This is the Gospel of Mark. And that is the Gospel of Luke. Watch this. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll the stone away from the entrance of the tomb?" But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. Mark 16. After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. Matthew 28. On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about this, suddenly two men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. Luke 24. Mark says the tomb was already opened and there was an angel sitting on the right. Matthew says the angel came with an earthquake, which killed the guard and rolled the stone. Luke says the tomb was already opened, but it was not only one angel, but two. It's a total mess in there. No one knows what's true or not, or if there's anything true whatsoever. Now let's talk about Paul. This dude was not a disciple. He didn't know Jesus. He wrote a bunch of letters to the Corinthians, Ephesians, Philippians, and Thessalonians, which have nothing to do with me of the rest of the world. Unless you are a Philippian or an Ephesian, you shouldn't be reading them because they are not for you. Honestly, I don't know why the believers put their noses in a bunch of letter that were not even dedicated to them. That's quite indiscreet. Let me be the first one to say this out loud. The letters of Paul are not for the Africans or the Americans. Send them back to their destinators, please.
Wait a minute. Who are you?
With that being said, make yourself at home in the comments section. Like and subscribe for episode X.